Back here in the Shell Reef Bayou, Oyster Bayou area, Cottonwood Bayou, all these areas here, we've had a big uh, fluctuation in our tides. The tides didn't really drop back out after the big front that we had, and then this last little front that we had a little kind of push through here really didn't push any water out, but it's added some more water into our areas. So these areas back here in these big back lakes like that, when you get that kind of flux or that push of extra water in there, these areas begin to light up. Uh, you get all back here in the Shell Reef Bayou, this area here, and work all these little islands that are back in here, over in Cottonwood Bayou. Got a bunch of little areas that are back in that. You can work around all these little islands. You can wade these. You can drift them if you want. Wading them would be much better. That's the primary thing that we like to do when we're working these back lakes. Get out and really work the water really, really well. You can really be productive back in here. But again, we're full swing into November, so another thing to also be aware of, especially toward the weekends, is your duck hunters. So some of these areas have a bunch of duck blinds in them, so you may have to contend with that. So always keep that in mind this time of year moving forward, at least until we get to the split season where there's a little downtime. But at least for the next foreseeable future, in a few weeks anyway, we're going to have to deal with that. But there's plenty of water out there that everybody can fish and hunt and do their thing without being any type of issues whatsoever. But again, Oyster Shell Bayou, or the Shell Reef Bayou back here, Oyster Bayou, back in here in Cottonwood, another area that I really like to fish. These guts that come back in here off the little back lake mouths from San Antonio Bay area that dump off into these. You can fish these. You can work the little guts and cuts that work back up into these areas. There's lots of little hidden gems that are back in these once you get on the ground and you start walking these. Now, the other thing that you have to kind of deal with, you got a lot of squishy bottom that are back in some of these. Some of them are a little bit deeper than others, so you have to kind of keep that in mind as well. So when you get out, you may want to just kind of probe around with your feet and see if that's something that you want to deal with when you're getting out of your boat. If not, then it may become a trolling motor trip where you're just kind of working around areas and trying to fish areas. One of the things we like to do when we get back in some of these spots like that, especially these big back lakes, is we'll throw topwater baits back there to kind of probe the water, see if we get any type of opportunities with either some blow-ups or some strikes or some takes, some swirls, whatever. Once we kind of see that, if they're not really committing to it, then we'll really work our plastics, our paddle tails, i.e. like the knocking tail, the down souths. You can throw your jerk shrimp in there by marker 54 and kind of free line those through these bottoms and through these big pothole areas in there. You've got some little scattered shell pads in some of these that you really won't see or know about unless you're either A, back there in your boat, or B, that you get in the water and you can really find them with your feet. Some of them are a little bit more pronounced than others, but nonetheless they are in there, and it's structure. It will hold fish in and around some of these areas. But again, lots of water that's in our system right now, so it really lights up these particular areas. So if you get an opportunity to take advantage of these particular areas during this time frame, please do so. You will do yourself a favor. You get back in there. In some of these, they're all connective. So if you've got the type of boat that can really run skinny back in some of these areas, you can even dump off into some other areas that even open up into other back lake areas that maybe not have been fished very much. So it gives you opportunity to get not fish that haven't been pressured very much. So you'll have an opportunity to catch you some fish here, like big brunnet that comes in here, and of course little brunnet connects into that. So I don't know, you may or may not be able to get across into these here. This one I know you can, and it connects, and you just got little back lakes that interconnect all these areas in here. So it gives you lots of opportunities to locate and find you some fish back here that really probably haven't been fished for. So those fish won't be quite as spooky. Again, the main things we're throwing, the down south in the original and burner shad. Incorporate some of the supermodel in some of these as well. Multiple flavors, white ice, bone diamond, big papa, Texas tea have all been some of the ones that's been pretty consistent for us. Chicken of the sea, magic grass, and other flavors. Mud minnow, firecracker, all those just kind of depend on what your water clarity is. The mirror lure Little Johns have been very good for us. The red and gold glitter, kitchen sink, which has got more gold and black and yellow that's in it, which has been pretty good. Watermelon red moving forward this time of year has been very good for us. Knocking tails, the same flavors. White ice, rogue, greenback, heavy metal have all been a staple for us from last spring all the way through the summer into the fall, and now heading into the wintertime. Those same flavors will still be productive and work well for you. 16th ounce jig heads, working them in multiple different ways, either straight retrieves, bounce them, ripping them, whatever you like to do. Work all of them that way, work them different ways, incorporate your little, depending on what your depth is, soft dines as well, soft dine XLs. Your corky season's really fixing to be in full swing once we get a consistent flow of cold air that stays in here and our water temps begin to hover in that mid to lower 60s, become really popular and become very good for us. So even now you can throw them even in the upper 60s, low 70s. There's not really a temperature for the corkies. You can work year round if you want, but really more so this time of year, the corkies really kind of light up and become a main staple for lots of fishermen to throw this time of year. Majors and minors, always, always, always a key thing into your fishing day to work these areas. Make sure you're paying attention to what the tides are doing, how they're moving, how much water is being flushed in and out of some of these back lakes areas. Because if there's a big water dump that's coming, then you may not want to be in some of these back lake areas. You can kind of put yourself in just a tad bit of jeopardy because it can get really skinny on you. And if you don't have the type of boat that can pop you up in and out of that kind of stuff and run, then you might be in a little bit of trouble. But it's always something to keep in mind, making sure that you're paying attention what your weather's doing as far as our fronts. Again, they're going to start lining up and moving forward. So every probably 8 to 10 days, we're probably going to see some form of some type of front, either a mild one or a big one, whatever, headed down this way, and it's going to continue to change, and our flux and our water and our fishing is going to be all over the place. So make sure that you have a lot of different options in your box, making sure that you got the right structure that you're fishing in and around and over the top of. And always have food source that's working in those areas to make sure you continue to stay productive. The Mott area, Long Reef Bend, all these areas in here, man, you've got multiple back lake mouths that dump out into this area. So again, this is one of my favorite areas to really fish, especially this time of year, because you get lots of different types of opportunities. You got shell bar, well, scattered, not necessarily shell bar, but you got shell pad areas. They're not super big, but they're small enough that they hold just enough fish, or the right fish, that you can look for in and around some of these areas. You got the back lake mouths where you got deeper guts that cut back into some of these areas, and when you got a big water dump, those fish like to concentrate down into some of those particular types of areas. You go all the way up here toward Jaybird Point. You've got these little back lakes that dump out into here as well, and you got opportunities to get back in some of these back lakes. You got Sherman's that comes all the way down here if you head down toward Spalding Bight area. So this one here has been pretty good for us. It's been pretty consistent for the most part. You can catch a few redfish, some decent trout that's been out of it, some black drum that have been scattered in and out of there. So an occasional flounder, but again, we're in that time of year, November, where you can't keep them as far as flounder go. You can catch them, just have to cut them loose. But there are opportunities for them to be back in some of these areas like that. Of course, these things all back up and they go into other back lake areas, so you have lots of different options that are back in these areas like that. So always keep that in mind. You're not just kind of restricted to the front half of this or to a particular part of it. You can really work lots of these different areas. Some of these areas, they're so vast that if you really take your time working these areas, you can spend several hours in there to a normal fishing day. You can 6 or 8 hours in some of these and not even cover a third of it. So always keep that in mind when you go in here. Fish it slow, especially coming into this time of the year, unless you just get into a great deal of a big school of fish one way or another that's going to really light it up for you. But most of the time, we're catching singles here, or maybe you catch a double or something to that effect. But it's not super great numbers, but you're consistent. You're catching. And that's the one thing that you always want to continue to make sure that you remember when you work these areas. Very slow, very methodical. Don't greyhound through some of these areas, because you can walk through fish, especially this time of the year. Once you get a little bit of a cool front that pumps through there, trying to kind of drops our water temp a little bit, it kind of moves fish around, so you have to kind of readjust and find and see what's going on as far as relocating some of these fish around here. So always keep that in mind when you're doing that and fishing these particular areas like that. Again, the same flavors that we've been throwing down south in the Twisted Tea, Big Papa, White Ice, Bone Diamond. A lot of the flavors that are mimicking what we've got, kind of like what our bait fish are. That's why the Soft Dine XL, it's got that mullet flavor where you got the silver grayish belly and the black back on there and the big eyes on it. Becomes a really great bait this time of year, because once we get some cooler water on a consistent basis, or we get that one good punch like the bigger one that we had not too long ago, it'll drop that water temp down, high 50s, low 60s like that, and that'll start pushing these migratory baits that we get in the spring and summer, and they'll start heading back out south again. So your main bait that's left in here is just shrimp and mullet. So that's why that bait really kind of stands out during this time of year. That's why the corkies, all the different ones, the floaters, the fat boys, the original in that, they're all become very good this time of year. Fish will eat. Sometimes they're just going to eat once a day if it's really cold. So that bigger profile bait kind of holds them over once they kind of get a hold of that in front of them like that. So they'll eat that and they're like, hey, I'm good for now. So always keep that in mind. That's why you should have kind of versatility, maybe a couple of different boxes of your weight boxes, maybe one just nothing with plastics of the different sizes and profiles. Then you have one that's just got your soft dines, your double D's, your corkies, maybe in a top water bait, but your suspended baits are in those. It's got a little bit bigger profile. It's always great to have the options like that with you. Just remember when you're working those types of areas that you may have to go through a few different baits to kind of figure out what they're wanting. Because once you kind of figure out their pattern, you can kind of lock it down, narrow it down, and go to town on them and really work the areas that you really want to be in. But work these back lake mouths, work the guts that are in there. Again, finding your food source that's in these areas is always a key thing. Majors and minors always is the best thing that you can do to work in and around those types of areas. Grass is your consistency, no matter what time of year it is. So if you got a nice flat somewhere that's got grass that's on it, spend some time on that thing and really work it, especially if you can incorporate that with the major and minor. You can really locate you some special fish. Redfish Point around here on Copano, just around the corner from where Copano Bay Bridge is and stuff. It's very easy to get to. The great thing about this little area back in here, you can do a double thing here. You can either wade this inside shoreline or you can drift it if you so choose. You've got lots of different options there. You've got lots of structure. Old piers that got blown away or have dilapidated over time. That's a great form of structure. If you're going to wade some of these areas back there, you can get in and around those. Just make sure if you do, where those older piers are, that's all you got is just a piling sticking up. Make sure that you remember that there's obstacles, obstructions, all kinds of stuff that are down in those. So if you're going to wade through that, just be careful because you could, hang up on some stuff in there, whether it be old wood, nails, all kinds of different things. So just be aware of that and just remember that when you wade some of these areas. Other thing good about that, if you got one of the fronts that's pushing in or even it's light wind from the north, northeast, this little inside area becomes protected for you. So you can fish this whole shoreline all the way down around by the airport. This point here, you've got the old nautical or navigation district little park that's right here by the airport that'll take you all the way up here by Copano Village. It's another kayak launch point there that's really good. That whole shoreline there can be very good at times. Again, if you got big, strong north, northeast, east wind, this whole area back here becomes very protected for you. Even from the south, southeast, it becomes very protected for you. So if you're wanting to even run down further south to get into Port Bay or Swan Lake, into those types of areas, or even fish around Rattlesnake and all that kind of, maybe even Italian Bend and Pete's Bend, this is all good areas here. You can run these types of areas and stay protected. If you run a little bit smaller boat, it's always smart to stay on a protected shoreline for as long as you can before you have to get out in the open water and take just a little bit of a beating there. But most of the time you can fish that. Just work your grass line edges. You've got some shell that's all down in here that can be very good at times. It's not big bars or any big reefs or anything like that, but just enough structure to hold some fish. Again, make sure that you're locating your food source in and around these particular areas. The top of bottom that's in here is kind of diverse. You got a little bit of everything. You got some hard stuff. You got some squishy stuff, firm, some mud. Again, you've got areas that's got grass. You even got some kind of marshy areas that can be very good at times. But you just have to take your time when you work these things, whether you're fishing it in the water or you're fishing it from the boat. Take your time with it and just kind of probe the water. Incorporate that major or minor in there and fish. When you fish those time frames around that major minor, fish the whole thing. Once you start tracking and really taking note of when you're getting your opportunities in and around those time frames, you can see how the bite increases and then starts to decrease and then kind of peters out over time. That it will be your bite will start to taper off, and then you have to go in what I call a grind time, or you're having to scratch some fish out here or there, but you can still locate and find fish that way. But it's just a good tactic or a game plan that you need to have moving forward as we get into more of our winter time, cooler months, colder months, depending on what we got ahead of us. So far, it's been kind of a wet month So all stuff to factor in. Make sure you have the right equipment on your boat when you have to deal with stuff. Even if it is start out a pretty day, it could change on you in a hurry. 16th ounce jig heads, paddle tails, down souths, knocking tails, marker 54 jerk shrimp, all the above. Again, the corkies that I mentioned earlier, the corkies become whatever flavors that you want to throw there. It's more of a profile thing, and then just kind of match what your water is. You can do your customs if that's what you want. You can do the originals. I just use the originals most of the time. If every once in a while I'll sneak a custom in there. Double D, another great this time of year bait with an ascension bait like that, so you can really work certain areas where you maybe have some deeper edges and stuff like that, so it becomes a very productive bait for you. But again, that's what I mentioned in the last little video there. Make sure you have 2 boxes, one that's got your plastics and one that's got your suspended bait, so you have an option to go to if you want to work it a certain way. All these areas lend you all different kinds of opportunities. This time of year, weather is everything for us. Water temps are everything for us. X amount of bait and the type of structure is all very important. So make sure that you really that you have a really great game plan in place, and then execute. Just stick with it. Don't deviate too terribly much for it. You'll find that if you stick with that game plan, which you've kind of put in place, and you put the right things in front of these fish, that you will be productive and you will locate and find your fish that you're looking for.